morning, dear students of class 12. Today we are going to take up yet one more poem from your syllabus, and the name of the poem is Dover Beach, and it's written by Matthew Arnold, a very famous Victorian poet from England. So please pay attention and go through the video which is coming up now on your screen. Good morning, dear students, once again, and we begin with the introduction of our next poem, that is Dover Beach, written by Matthew Arnold. On your screen you can see the photograph of famous Victorian British poet Matthew Arnold. Let's read something about him first before we begin with the text of the poem. So here you can see Matthew Arnold was born on 24th December 1822 and he died on 15th April 1888. So he was 66 when he passed away. He was an English poet and a cultural critic who worked as an inspector of schools. So he had a first-hand knowledge about the education system of the then England. And he was the son of Thomas Arnold, the celebrated headmaster of Rugby School, and brother to both Tom Arnold, literary professor, and William Delafield Arnold, novelist and colonial administrator. Colonial administrator? British colonial rule extended beyond its boundaries to as far as India and Australia and Africa and many other countries of the world. So one of his brothers was a colonial administrator and a novelist. Another was a literary professor, and his father himself was a celebrated headmaster of the Rugby School. Rugby School is a very prestigious school in England and it exists even today. And so you can see that he came from a very highly qualified family, learned people. All members of his family were very highly learned people, and he was himself, no less, he was an inspector of schools. Matthew Arnold has been characterized as a sage writer. Now, very often this is taken from Wikipedia. You can go into Wikipedia and you can possibly find out more about this concept of sage writer. A type of writer who chastises or purifies and instructs the reader on contemporary social issues. He was also an inspector of schools for 35 years. Now that's not a joke. For 35 years, this man on your screen, he was the inspector of schools and supported the concept of state-regulated secondary education. So he was an educationist, an inspector of schools, plus a great Victorian poet. Why do I call him great Victorian poet? Because as a poet he was no doubt very great, and then at the same time he belonged to an era which was the rule of Queen Victoria of England. So now this is the photograph of Matthew Arnold taken by Elliot and Fry in the year 1883. That was 5 years before his death. So this is not the young Matthew Arnold you see on the screen, but Matthew Arnold in his 60s. He was this portrait or this photograph was actually taken. So now let's read something about the poem before we begin with the text. So the central idea is on your screen. You can see from here that in this poem Dover Beach, Arnold expresses his grief and lament. Remember, these are the keynotes of this poem, and as I told you, he was a sage writer. His job was to purify the concepts of humanity so that people changed their ways of life and lived a life in a better way. So he expresses grief and lament for the rapid and inevitable decline in religious faith in the mid-1800s. That is in England in the mid-1800s. Arnold mourns a society. He feels sorry for the society because the society was a changing society and people were forgetting God, forgetting religion, Time and again, over the centuries, this has always been the trend. The modern generation, the new generation, forgets the old values and tries to live life in a different way. Arnold seriously wanted to stop that from happening, and so that people were God-fearing. People had the same feelings for religion. So that's the reason why he tries to mourn a society that has lost its cultural, moral, and spiritual significance, giving rise to cruelty, deception, uncertainty, and hopelessness. Now, recently you saw how barbarically they killed a pregnant elephant in Kerala. See, this is what has come to it now, you see, because people have become, they have the shape of human beings, but they are actually demons. And that's the reason why divine justice is being meted out in this way, that we are now suffering from the coronavirus pandemic. See, we have done enough sins in our lives, and now it's the time for divine justice. So Judgment Day, as I had mentioned in my previous video also, is coming closer, coming nearer. So Matthew Arnold was trying to rectify the society. He was trying to give this concept that we have to change our ways. We have to stop cruelty. We have to stop deception. People have become so deceptive. People have become so dishonest. Uncertainty and hopelessness. After providing the readers with a vivid, it's not reads, it should be readers, there's a printing error here. After providing the readers with a vivid, means a very detailed graphical impression of the sea, the poet presents the grieving aspect of the declining faith in God and religion through the symbol of the sea. So the sea is the symbol of religion, God and religion. Okay? The religious and spiritual faith that was once glorified has started to lose its luster, means shine. Now here on your screen you can see I have purposely included a map, because this poem is better understood if you look at the map of United Kingdom or England. Do you notice that pin, the red marking on your map which points out Dover? That's the Dover beach. I'm zooming in. That's Dover, and in between you have English Channel. It's written there with blue, you can see, which separates France from England. So you have on the other end, on the other side of the English Channel, you have the coast of France. You can see Paris, capital of France, mentioned also in the mainland of Europe, and there you have London, which is the capital of England, and then you have the beach at Dover. So this poem was written actually when Matthew Arnold had gone to Dover, and he was spending his honeymoon with his newly married wife in a beach resort, and he was looking, because once a poet always a poet, though he was on his honeymoon, when he was looking out of the window of the villa where he was putting up, he could see the sea beach outside, and then he could see the vast expanse of the English Channel, the sea in front, and beyond that he could possibly see the coastal lights of France. He could possibly see that, and as it happens, the poetic inspiration started working inside his mind, and he decided, he became very philosophical, and he started thinking about the declining faith in religion and culture that the British population was undergoing. In fact, it was happening all over Europe, and so Matthew Arnold decided to compose this particular poem. So this poem is that's why I said in the beginning that he is a philosophical writer and he's a sage writer, and this poem is also very philosophical. So much for the map of England. Now let's see what else we can find out about the poem before we begin with the text. Now, Dover Beach by Matthew Arnold. You can see a beautiful scene of the night with the moon in the sky and the sea with the beach. It's deserted, nobody's around. This is a figurative representation of what probably Matthew Arnold saw outside his window in reality when he looked out of the window. So let's try to understand the form. First of all, the form of the poem is, it's a dramatic monologue. Now, what do you mean by a dramatic monologue? A dramatic monologue is usually a poem in which there is only one character who speaks things, but the presence of another silent character can always be felt throughout the poem. So in this poem too, there is no exception. You will see that here the speaker, whom we presume to be the poet himself, is the one who is doing all the talking, while there is a presence of a second person with him, and undoubtedly that second person is none other but his newly wedded or newly married wife. So he is asking her to come and stand next to him near the window and look out into the sea, and he is commenting about all that is happening in the world. So it's a dramatic monologue composed in loose iambic pentameter. So that is the composition, the pattern, or the manner in which the composition has been done. Iambic pentameter is a method of scanning a poem. So that is not part of your syllabus, so I'm not going into the details of that. Had you been in graduation with doing English honors, I would have explained iambic, trochaic or anapaestic meters of poetry, scansion. So that is not required as of now, but you can just remember this much, that it is a dramatic monologue where there is a speaker who speaks, but there is a silent listener who is with the speaker, who does not speak throughout the poem, but whose presence can be felt throughout the poem. So, and that person is none other but Matthew Arnold's wife. Now here you have a mention of the theme as well, and you can see the crucifix or the cross next to the theme, because this is a religious theme. Loss of faith, nature. There are three themes. First is loss of faith, about which I already told you, and then nature, the beauty of nature, nature akin to human existence, likening nature with human life. So nature is the second theme, and the third theme is love as the final refuge. Now let's not forget that love is something which is professed by all religions, that we must love ourselves and we must love our neighbors. We must love our fellow human beings. So love alone can cure this world. Love alone can save humanity. So that is also an important theme in this poem. Now let's see the literary devices used in the poem, also given here very beautifully. You have imagery, in which you have visual imagery, that is a long line of spray, the moon blanched land as on a darkling plain, and then that is the visual imagery. That means what you can visualize in your mind's eye. So you can, when you read the lines of the poem, you can imagine. And second is oral imagery. Oral is the sounds that you get to hear. You can almost hear those sounds as described in the poem by the poet. Grating roar, withdrawing roar, eternal note of sadness, confused alarms. These are words and phrases that you come across when you read the text of the poem. Then, yet another kind of figure of speech or literary device, simile, very commonly used by poets in almost every poem you come across this. Simile is a comparison, lay like the folds of a bright girdle hurled. So you see, comparing to a bright belt. Girdle means belt. So using the word like, we know that simile means a comparison where you make use of the words as or like to compare two different things. So you find that in this poem. Then you have anaphora, yet another literary device or a figure of speech. The sea is calm, the tide is full. So we will come across all these things when we do the text, and we can have some explanation there. Now let's see alliteration. Gleams and is gone, where you have two or more words in the same line beginning with the same alphabet. So you see gleams with G and then gone with G. To lie before us like a land of dreams. Lie like land, L, alliteration. And then internal rhyme, the cliffs of England stand. Internal rhyme. England stand, A-N-D. So rhyming, two successive words seem to be rhyming or ringing with the same, you can say, resonance in this case. So that is how literary devices are used in this poem. You then have metaphor, the sea of faith. Sea of faith. On one hand you have the real sea before his eyes, and on the other hand the sea of faith. Faith means religion. And then allusion. Allusion means an indirect reference. Sophocles, the Greek tragedian. So alluding to Sophocles, the Greek tragedian. We have a reference to Sophocles also in this poem. Now let's see the keynotes or the key points or the signposts of the poem. The setting of the poem is described as Dover Bridge. Presents the sight of a beautiful calm sea in a full tide, and the moonlight shores of France and cliffs of England. Okay, so one hand you have the beach here with the cliffs overlooking the sea in England, and on the other shore of the sea across the English Channel, where actually Dover is peninsular in nature, and from the point of Dover to across the English Channel to mainland France, the distance is the shortest, or the width of the English Channel is the least, and that's the reason why you can actually see the lights of the opposite beach or opposite coast. The speaker, number 2, the speaker asks his lover to come to the window. Lover is none other but his wife. So he asks his lover to come to the window and enjoy the beautiful night. The waves have formed line of spray at the point where the sea meets the moonlit land, and movement of the waves. There are a lot of spelling mistakes here, so kindly bear with me. So it's not waves, it should be waves. The movement of the waves create a grating roar of pebbles, which seems to make a sound of eternal sadness. Then point number 3, Sophocles, the Greek tragedian, had heard the same roar long ago in the Aegean shore. Aegean shore refers to the shoreline of the Aegean Sea. Aegean Sea does not exist. It used to be there in the past. Since then the things have changed, the names have changed. And it reminded him of human misery. So even Sophocles, before the birth of Christ, Sophocles was a Greek tragedian long ago, long before Matthew Arnold. And so even then, maybe thousands of years ago, Sophocles must have also felt the same when he stood by the Aegean Sea and looked at the waves. He must have also felt sorry about human misery. They hear the same sound by the northern sea. The sea of faith, which was once full and held the world together. Here the sea of faith refers to religion. There was once a time when people were more religiously oriented, and so they had a better understanding and they lived life together in perfect harmony. But now, with the changing times, people are forgetting the religion and people are becoming isolated, separated from each other. So there was a time when the sea of faith was full and held the world together like a bright girdle, but now it has receded and it makes a long sad roar, exposing the world to the naked stones of the world. Next, the speaker asks his lover to be true to one another, at least amidst such uncertainty. He requests his beloved, his wife, that at least we have each other and we should be true to each other in our feelings and in our relationship. Then, number 6, the world which had seemed new and beautiful now has become hollow and devoid of love, joy, direction, certainty, or peace. They have become like an army on a dark plain, confused by the alarms of war and struggle in arms which clash about in the uncertainty of darkness. So, this is what the world has come to, according to Matthew Arnold. Now, we'll read the text of the poem once and then we will try to understand line by line. So, on your screen, you have now the text of the poem Dover Beach by famous British Victorian poet Matthew Arnold. Dover Beach. The sea is calm tonight. The tide is full. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. The cliffs of England stand, glimmering and vast, out in the tranquil bay. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Only from the long line of spray, where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. At their return up the high strand, begin and cease and then again begin, with tremulous cadence slow, and bring the eternal note of sadness in. Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. We find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. The sea of faith was once too at the full, and round earth's shore lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. But now I only hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind down the vast edges drear and naked shingles of the world. Ah, love, let us be true to one another, for the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, hath really neither joy, nor love, nor light, nor certitude, nor peace, nor help for pain. And we are here as on a darkling plain, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight, where ignorant armies clash by night. Matthew Arnold. Beautiful poem, extraordinary. Now let us try to understand this poem line by line. So now let us try to move to the beginning of the poem once again, and let us try to understand the lines. So here we have the first stanza, which begins almost in a romantic mood, and it apparently seems initially that perhaps this poem is more of a love poem, but then the tone of the poem changes towards the end. So we shall see what is said in the first stanza. The sea is calm tonight, the tide is full, meaning to say that the sea is peaceful, tranquil on that particular night when it was being witnessed by the speaker. And the tide is full refers to the full tide or the high tide. The moon lies fair upon the straits. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. Now, as the narrator looks out into the sea, what does he observe? He observes that the sea is calm and quiet, and it is filled with water at the time of high tide. The moon is shining brightly or fair upon the narrow English Channel. Straits here refers to the English Channel. On the French coast, the light gleams and is gone. And then our speaker is staring at the French coast. which is some 20 miles away on the other side of the English Channel. So here from Dover, the French coast was the nearest, that is only 20 miles across the English Channel. He sees the light on the French coast gleaming, and now as the light has gone off, he concentrates on the English shore. Now what is the difference? On the English side of the English Channel, that is the English coast, the cliffs of England overlook the sea. So the famous cliffs are to be seen on the seashore of Dover. They stand tall with their large wavering reflections in the quiet sea. So the cliffs of England stand glimmering and vast out in the tranquil bay. Tranquil bay refers to quiet sea. Come to the window, sweet is the night air. Now he beckons, he calls his sweetheart, his beloved, his wife, to come and stand beside him near the window and look out into the sea. So enjoy the sweet night air coming from where the sea meets the moonlit land of France. So the sweet is the night air only from the long line of spray where the sea meets the moon-blanched land. The moon-blanched land means the moonlit land of the coast of France. And the wind, the sea breeze is blowing, and it's beautiful outside, and they are both standing at the window. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles, and then he is asking her to listen to the continuous and irritating or grating sound of the pebbles drawn by the waves. The waves are drawing the stones backward to the sea and then throwing them or flinging them back onto the high shore or the strand. So it's a continuous process. The waves come and go, and as they come and go, they draw the pebbles with them towards the sea and then again throw them back upon the shore of the sea. That is being described here. Listen, you hear the grating roar of pebbles which the waves draw back and fling. Fling means to throw. At their return up the high strand. Upon the high shore or strand or the seashore, these pebbles are flung by the waves. Begin and cease and then again begin. Meaning to say that it is a continuous process. It starts, it stops and starts again and stops again. So that is what the poet is trying to say. With tremulous cadence slow. Meaning to say the trembling rhythm continues very slowly. But this motion is a slow but continuous motion, and the rhythm, there is a rhythm in this pulling in of the pebbles and then flinging them back upon the high shore. There is a rhythm to it. So that is what the poet is referring to. And bring the eternal note of sadness in. Now the sound produced by these grating pebbles are somewhat melancholic because there is a monotone, and this sound, this eternal note of sadness is brought in by this sound. The monotonous rhythm of the waves makes the speaker depressed. So from here the tone of the poem actually changes from something romantic or cheerful into something sad or melancholic. So from here there is a change. Notice that now he talks about the Greek philosopher Sophocles. He says, Sophocles long ago heard it on the Aegean, and it brought into his mind the turbid ebb and flow of human misery. Meaning to say, the speaker is now reminded that Sophocles, the Greek tragedian, also heard the same sound sitting on the shore of the Aegean Sea. So that sound actually brought to Sophocles, to the mind of Sophocles, the picture of human sufferings. The picture of human sufferings, just like the turbid or the muddy water going in and out. That is the ebb and flow of the muddy water. When the water recedes, mud comes out. Again, water flows in. It is a continuous process. The pebbles are drawn in and thrown back. The mud is revealed and the water becomes muddy, and then again the waves come in to cover up the mud. So it's a continuous process happening, and that is what the poet is talking about here. So then he says, we find also in the sound a thought, hearing it by this distant northern sea. Meaning to say that he has also found a feeling of sadness hearing similar sound beside the North Sea. The Strait of Dover is actually situated between the English Channel and the North Sea. So I showed you the map. If you look at the map once again, you will see that the North Sea falls on the upper side, and then you have the English Channel, and then you come towards the southern part of the English Channel. So Dover is situated between the English Channel and the North Sea. So on one side of Dover, the southern side can be considered to be the English Channel part, and the northern side is considered to be the North Sea. So that is what the poet or the speaker is saying, that the speaker has also found a feeling of sadness hearing similar sound beside the northern sea, far away from the sea of Sophocles. Sophocles had felt this while he sat on the shore, while sitting on the shore of the Aegean Sea centuries ago, and now in this Victorian era, the poet says that he can find the same melancholic tone in the noise made or the sound made by the sea. And then the poet becomes more and more philosophical, and he says, the sea of fate was once, too, at the full and round earth's shore, lay like the folds of a bright girdle furled. So human faith, or the religious faith, and faith in fellow human beings once covered the earth, as I have explained earlier in the video, once covered the earth like seawater. It was at its fullest as the tide is now. Faith covered the earth like the folds of a bright girdle. What is a girdle? A girdle is a belt, folding or furled well. So it was once upon a time, religious faith covered the entire expanse of the earth like a bright girdle. But now what has happened? Now what has happened to that religious faith? But now I only hear its melancholy long withdrawing roar. Meaning to say that at present the speaker regrets that those days are gone. Faith is fading away from the society. What has happened is that it was a time in the past when people were closely associated with each other and they had a faith in religion. It was the time when faith made everything easy and solved many problems, made people united, brought meaning to life. But now that faith is missing. The speaker therefore is regretting that those days are now gone. Faith is fading away from the society, just like the wave is from the shore. So, but now I only get to hear its melancholy, long withdrawing roar, retreating to the breath of the night wind. So he only hears the sorrowful roar of the retreating steps of faith with the retreating tide of seawater. So then he says, the night wind down the vast edges drearer and naked shingles of the world. So meaning to say that it only leaves behind the chill night wind whistling or breathing. Breath here refers to breathing or blowing over the desolate beach with dull or drear edges of the cliffs and the raw or naked pebbles or shingles. So what has the poet done here? The poet actually has created a fearful picture of the underlying nakedness of the colorful modern world. He has exposed the nakedness of the modern world. So the naked shingles of the world refers to the nakedness of the modern world. Ah, love, let us be true. And then he addresses his beloved and says, he turns to his beloved and he urges her to be faithful to each other. Let us be true to one another. For the world which seems to lie before us like a land of dreams, so various, so beautiful, so new, because the world which lies before us, he says that let us be faithful to each other. The dreamy modern world which seems so beautiful with its so many varieties is not actually a source of joy. So it's not a source of joy, it's not a source of love, it's not a source of light, it's not a source of certainty, or it is not even a source of peace. It does not provide any kind of positivity to life. So there is no certitude, certainty, no peace, nor help for pain. In the modern world, nobody helps anyone. See, people have grown selfish. They don't want to help each other. The sea of faith has receded. Religion, belief in religion, love your fellow human beings. The concept is totally changed in the modern world. Nobody cares. Nobody bothers what happens to you. So there is no help for pain in the modern world. And we are here as on a darkling plain. So he says that we are in this world as if we are in a dark place. Darkling plain refers to a vast expanse of land which is full of darkness. So the modern world is like that, where we don't have any compassion, any sympathy, any understanding, any fellow feeling. So people are selfish, self-centered, and isolated from each other, swept with confused alarms of struggle and flight. So we are completely unaware of what we are doing. We are busy in a confused struggle. So where ignorant armies clash by night, meaning to say that we are in a confused struggle as if ignorant soldiers are fighting with each other in the darkness. We are like those ignorant soldiers. We have been ordered to fight and we are fighting it out. We are aimless. We don't know where we are going in this modern world. So let us have proper, faithful relationship and understanding between the two of us. Otherwise, life is going to become really, really melancholic and really tragic. So this is what Matthew Arnold tries to say. This is Matthew Arnold's assessment of the morally corrupted modern world full of vanity. Just show, outward show, but there is no intrinsic quality, no matter within. It's all outward show. And so with this note, with this philosophical note, that the world has changed, no doubt, that we have become modern, no doubt, but people have become isolated from each other. They have become self-centered, they have become selfish, they don't care for each other, and they don't bother for each other. With that note, Matthew Arnold ends his poem.